After my wife Catherine was lowered into the ground, my son found a folded cream-colored paper hidden in her jewelry box. He glanced at it, laughed, and threw it into a black garbage bag, saying it was worthless trash that should stay buried forever. I waited until they left the room to dig it out of the filth. I took that crumpled paper to the bank the next morning. When the manager saw it, his face went pale. He locked the door and whispered, "Call the police, Harrison. Do not leave this chair." That piece of trash was about to cost my son his freedom. Before I tell you what was written on that paper, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me share this warning with other parents. And tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I read every single one. My name is Harrison Blake. I am 72 years old. I have spent 50 years building houses with these two hands. I know the difference between a load-bearing wall and a cheap facade. But I never realized the foundation of my own family was rotting until the day I buried my wife. The smell of lilies and damp earth was still clinging to my black suit as I walked into my living room. I expected silence. I expected grief. Instead, I heard the pop of a cork. My son Preston and his wife Tiffany were standing by the fireplace. Preston was holding a bottle of Chateau Margaux, 1985. That was the bottle Catherine and I were saving for our golden anniversary next month. He was pouring it into a water glass like it was cheap soda. Tiffany was on her phone, pacing back and forth in her high heels, clicking against the hardwood floors I laid myself 30 years ago. She was not calling relatives to thank them for coming. She was calling a junk removal service. I heard her say, "Yes, we need a full crew here within the hour." "No, not next week. Today. We need the master bedroom cleared out completely. Just dumpster it all. Old clothes, knick-knacks, dusty boxes. We are listing the property on Airbnb by Monday, so I need it empty." My heart hammered against my ribs. Catherine had been gone for 3 days. We had just come from the cemetery less than an hour ago, and they were already erasing her. I stepped forward, my voice trembling not from age but from a rage I had never felt before. "Put the phone down, Tiffany. Put that bottle down, Preston. This is your mother's house. Her scent is still on the pillows. You are not throwing anything away today." Preston turned to me. He did not look like a grieving son. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. He took a long sip of my wine and smirked. "Dad, please. Do not be dramatic. We are doing you a favor. You cannot manage this big place alone with your condition." Condition. That was the word they had been using lately. Ever since I forgot where I put my car keys once last month, they decided I was senile. They decided I was a child to be managed. Tiffany hung up the phone and sighed, looking at me with eyes that held zero warmth. "Harrison, be practical. This house is a gold mine in the Seattle market. Keeping it filled with Catherine's hoarding is just losing money. We need to modernize. Gray walls, minimalist furniture. The old sentimental junk has to go." She called 30 years of memories junk. The quilt Catherine stitched by hand. The books she read to Preston when he was a boy. I walked over to the mantel to grab the bottle from Preston, but my hand was shaking. I felt weak. Maybe it was the grief. Maybe it was the fact I had not eaten in 2 days. Preston easily stepped back, holding the bottle out of my reach, like he was teasing a toddler. "Relax, Dad. Go sit in your recliner. We have got this. You just rest your tired brain." He turned his back on me and walked over to Catherine's vanity table in the corner. It was the only piece of furniture we brought from our first apartment. He started opening drawers, pulling out her scarves, her reading glasses, her hairbrushes, and tossing them into a heavy-duty black trash bag Tiffany was holding open. "Stop it!" I shouted, moving toward them. Preston ignored me. He reached for the small velvet jewelry box that Catherine kept hidden in the back of the bottom drawer. My breath caught in my throat. That box was private. She never let anyone touch it. Preston popped the lid open. I expected him to find her pearl necklace or the diamond earrings I bought her when the business finally took off. But the box was empty of jewelry. Instead, there was only one thing inside: a piece of paper. It was folded 4 times. The paper was thick, cream-colored, slightly yellowed at the edges. It looked old. Preston pulled it out, unfurling it with his thumb and forefinger. He squinted at it, reading the handwritten text scrawled across the center. "What is this?" he muttered. Tiffany leaned over his shoulder, wrinkling her nose. "It looks like another one of her church donation receipts. Or maybe some old grocery list." God, she kept everything. Preston laughed a dry, cruel sound. "Access code 8821. Project Phoenix," he read aloud, his voice dripping with mockery. Sounds like some nonsense she wrote down from a spy movie. Mom was really losing it at the end. Wasn't she, poor old girl? Her brain was mush. Just like yours, Dad. He did not even finish reading the bottom of the page. He did not check the back. He just crumpled the heavy paper in his fist. "Worthless," he said. He dropped the paper into the black trash bag. It landed on top of Catherine's favorite silk scarf and a half-used bottle of her perfume. "This should stay buried forever," he said, tying the knot on the bag. Then he looked at me, pointing a finger at my chest. "The truck will be here in 10 minutes. Do not fish anything out, Dad. We are doing this for your own good. Go take a nap. You look terrible." They picked up the wine bottle and the trash bag, walking out toward the garage to wait for the junk crew. I stood there in the silence of the empty living room. The air felt heavy. My knees finally gave out, and I sank onto the floor. I felt small. I felt defeated. I was 72 years old, a man who once commanded crews of 200 men, a man who built skyscrapers. And now I was being ordered around in my own home by a son who had never calloused his hands a day in his life. But then I remembered the look on Preston's face when he read that code. Project Phoenix. Catherine was not senile. She was the sharpest woman I ever knew. She handled the books for my construction company for 40 years. She never made a math error, not once. If she wrote something down and hid it in her most private box, it was not nonsense. I waited. I counted the seconds until I heard the heavy garage door rumble shut. I pulled myself up. My joints popped. My back ached. But I moved. I walked to the kitchen where they had left the other trash bags. I found the one Preston had tied up. I did not care about dignity anymore. I tore the plastic open with my bare hands. The smell of Catherine's perfume wafted up, hitting me like a physical blow. I pushed past the scarves. I pushed past the hairbrushes. There it was, the crumpled ball of cream paper. I picked it up, my hands trembling. I smoothed it out on the granite countertop. I read the code again. Project Phoenix. Access code 8821. But then I saw what Preston had missed, because he was too arrogant to look closely. At the very bottom, in handwriting that was shaky but pressed hard into the paper, Catherine had written a message. It was dated just 2 days before she died. It said, "Harrison, if you are reading this, I am gone. Do not trust Preston. Do not sign anything. Take this paper to Henderson at the bank immediately. He knows everything." A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Seattle rain beating against the window. Do not trust our son. Catherine knew. She knew something was coming. I looked at the door leading to the garage. I could hear Preston and Tiffany laughing outside, probably celebrating their future inheritance. They thought I was a confused old man taking a nap. They thought I was helpless. I folded the paper and put it in my inside jacket pocket, right next to my heart. I was not going to take a nap. I grabbed my car keys from the hook. I walked out the back door, slipping into the rain. I was going to the bank, and I had a feeling that the war had just begun. The dinner table that night felt less like a family gathering and more like a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. We sat at the long mahogany table, the one I had carved by hand, for Catherine's 40th birthday. There were no candles. There was no warmth. The only sound was the scraping of silver forks against china plates. We were eating takeout from a high-end Italian place, but to me the food tasted like cardboard. Preston sat at the head of the table. My seat. He had taken it without asking, without even a glance in my direction. Tiffany sat to his right, scrolling through her phone, occasionally showing him photos of vacation spots in the Maldives. I sat alone on the left, staring at the empty chair where Catherine used to sit. The silence was thick, suffocating, broken only when Preston cleared his throat. He wiped his mouth with a linen napkin and placed it deliberately on the table. "Dad, we need to discuss the timeline," he said. His voice was casual, businesslike, as if we were discussing a supply chain issue at the construction site rather than the end of my life as I knew it. I looked up, meeting his gaze. The timeline for what I asked, though, deep in my gut, I already knew the answer. "For the transition," Tiffany chimed in, finally putting her phone down. "We have been looking into facilities. We found one that is perfect for your needs. It is called Golden Oaks. It is very exclusive. They have 24-hour supervision, memory care specialists, and even a garden where you can sit." Supervision. Memory care. They were talking about a nursing home. But not just any nursing home. I knew Golden Oaks. My company had bid on the construction contract for their new wing 5 years ago. I knew exactly what kind of place it was. It was a warehouse for the unwanted elderly, painted in pastel colors to hide the smell of despair. It was where people went to be forgotten. "I am not going to a home," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "I am perfectly capable of living in my own house. I built this house. I know every wire, every pipe, every beam. I am not leaving it." Preston sighed, a long, exaggerated sound that signaled his patience was wearing thin. "Dad, be realistic. You are forgetting things. You are getting confused. Today with the trash was just one example. What happens when you leave the stove on? What happens when you wander off and get lost? We cannot watch you 24 hours a day. We have our own lives. We have the company to run." "The company," I repeated. The word tasted bitter. "You mean my company, the one I founded, the one I still own 51% of. I may have stepped back from daily operations, Preston, but I am still the majority shareholder, and I am telling you I am not going anywhere." Preston exchanged a look with Tiffany. It was a look of shared amusement, like parents listening to a child make a ridiculous demand. He reached into his briefcase, which was sitting on the floor beside him, and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He slid it across the polished wood until it stopped right in front of my plate. "Open it," he said. I hesitated. The envelope felt heavy, ominous. I opened the clasp and pulled out the documents inside. The first page was a medical evaluation. It was dated 3 weeks ago. It had my name on it. It had my date of birth. And at the bottom, signed by a doctor I had never met, was a diagnosis. Advanced dementia. Competency denied. I stared at the words. I read them again. I had not seen a doctor in 6 months aside from my cardiologist for a routine checkup. I had never taken a cognitive test. "This is a lie," I whispered. "I never saw this doctor. This is a fabrication." Preston took a sip of his wine, looking bored. "Dr. Sterling is a very respected specialist, Dad. He reviewed your file. He spoke with us about your behavior. His professional opinion is that you are no longer capable of making financial or personal decisions. That report is already filed with the court." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. There was no love in them. There was no concern. There was only cold, hard calculation. "Based on that report," he continued, "the court has granted me emergency guardianship. It means I make the decisions now. I decide where you live. I decide what happens to your assets, and I decide what happens to your shares in the company. My blood ran cold. Guardianship. It was the legal equivalent of being erased. If this stood, I would have no rights. I could not access my bank accounts. I could not hire a lawyer. I could not even choose what I ate for breakfast. I would be a prisoner in a system designed to strip me of everything. And as for the 51%, Tiffany added, smiling sweetly, as your guardian Preston will be managing that for you. We have already found a buyer for the company, a conglomerate from Chicago. They are offering a very generous buyout. We signed the papers on Friday. Friday. That was 2 days away. You are selling the company, I choked out. You are selling Blake Construction. 3 generations of sweat and blood. You are selling it to strangers. We are cashing out, Dad, Preston corrected. The industry is changing. We want to enjoy our lives. We want to travel. We do not want to be tied down to concrete and contracts like you were. With the money from the sale and the house, we will be set for life, and you will be taken care of at Golden Oaks. It is a win-win. He made it sound so simple, so logical. He was stealing my life's work, stealing my home and locking me away, and he called it a win-win. I looked at the medical report again. I looked at the signature. I knew how much a report like this cost. I knew there were doctors who would sign anything for the right price. My son had not just betrayed me. He had orchestrated a coup. He had been planning this for months, maybe years. While Catherine was dying, while I was grieving, he was buying doctors and lining up buyers. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. I will not let you do this, I said. I will fight you. I will go to the police. Preston laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time, loud and echoing in the empty dining room. Who are they going to believe, Dad? The successful CEO with a court order and a medical report from a top specialist, or the confused, grieving old man who keeps old trash in his pockets? He pointed at my chest, at the pocket where the cream-colored paper was hidden. Go to bed, old man. The movers come tomorrow at 8. Pack a small bag. Just the essentials. We will handle the rest. He turned back to his meal, dismissing me as if I were already gone. Tiffany picked up her phone again, typing rapidly. Probably booking their first-class tickets to the Maldives. I stood there for a moment watching them. The people I had fed, clothed, and protected. The son I had taught to ride a bike. The son I had walked through the framing of his first house. He was gone. The boy I loved was dead. Sitting in his place was a stranger with a hollow heart. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I did not go to my bedroom. I went to the study. I locked the door behind me, though I knew locks meant nothing to them now. I sat at my desk, my hand trembling as I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the paper Catherine had left me. I smoothed it out under the desk lamp. Access code 8821. Preston thought he had won. He thought he held all the cards. He had the medical report. He had the court order. He had the strength of youth and the arrogance of the wicked. But he did not have this paper. He did not know what Catherine knew. He did not know that his mother, the quiet woman who baked cookies and knitted quilts, was the only reason he was not already in prison. She had protected him. She had hidden his sins. But in her final days, she had realized that protecting him meant destroying me. And she had made a choice. I looked at the clock on the wall. 7 p.m. The bank opened at 9 a.m. I had 14 hours. 14 hours to survive in a house with 2 predators. 14 hours to hold on to my sanity. I folded the paper carefully and put it back in my pocket. I would not pack a bag for Golden Oaks. I would not pack a bag at all. Tomorrow I was not going to a nursing home. I was going to war. And as I stared at the photo of Catherine on my desk, I made a vow. I would not let them sell my company. I would not let them take my home. And I would certainly not let them think that Harrison Blake was a man who went down without a fight. I turned off the lamp and sat in the darkness, clutching the paper like a weapon. The enemy was not at the gate. The enemy was sleeping down the hall. But come morning, they would learn that even a confused old man could still bring the whole house down. I parked my truck 3 blocks away from the First National Bank. I did not want anyone to see my license plate. The rain was still falling, a relentless gray drizzle that soaked through my coat as I walked with my head down. I kept my hand over my chest, protecting the pocket where the cream-colored paper lay against my heart. It felt hot like a burning coal. The bank was a building I knew well. I had renovated the lobby 10 years ago, installing the Italian marble floors that echoed under my wet boots as I walked in. The security guard nodded at me. He knew me as Mr. Blake, the man who brought donuts for the staff every Christmas. He did not know I was currently a fugitive in my own life. I walked straight past the tellers and the line of customers. I went to the glass office at the back. The nameplate on the door read, Arthur Henderson, Branch Manager. Arthur and I went back 20 years. We played poker on Thursdays until his wife got sick. He was a good man, a man of numbers and rules. I knocked once and opened the door without waiting. Arthur looked up, startled. He looked older than the last time I saw him. His hair was thinner, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Harrison, he said, half rising from his chair. I was so sorry to hear about Catherine. I meant to come to the service, but with the quarter closing, things have been chaotic. I closed the door behind me and locked it. The click of the lock sounded loud in the quiet office. Arthur's eyes widened. He sat back down slowly. It is not a social call, Arthur, I said, sitting in the leather chair opposite him. I need you to look at something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Not the banker truth, the poker table truth. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the paper. It was wrinkled and stained with coffee grounds from the trash, but the code was still clear. I smoothed it out on his pristine mahogany desk. Catherine left this for me, I said. She said you would know what it means. Arthur looked at the paper. He adjusted his glasses. When he saw the words Project Phoenix and the code 8821, he did not look confused. He flinched. It was a small reaction, a tightening of the jaw, but I saw it. He looked up at me, and for the first time in 20 years, I saw fear in his eyes. Where did you get this? He whispered. Does it matter? I asked. Just type it in, Arthur. Catherine said it was important. He hesitated. His hand hovered over his keyboard. He looked at the door I had locked, then back at me. He took a deep breath and began to type. Click, click, click. He hit enter. I watched his face. I expected him to tell me it was a secret savings account. Maybe an insurance policy Catherine had hidden away for a rainy day. I was hoping for a miracle. Instead, I watched the blood drain from Arthur's face until he was the color of ash. A red light on his desk phone started blinking silently. He ignored it. He stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open. Oh my God, he breathed. Harrison, you did not know. Know what I demanded, leaning forward. Is it money? Did she leave me money? Arthur looked at me with an expression of pure pity. It was the same look the doctor gave me when he told me Catherine had cancer. No, Harrison. This is not a savings account. This is a tracking number for a cross-collateralized loan obligation. It is a debt file. Debt. I frowned. That is impossible. The house is paid off. The company has zero liabilities. I made sure of that before I stepped down. Catherine handled the books. We were debt-free. Arthur turned the monitor around so I could see. I did not understand the banking codes, but I understood the numbers in the bottom right corner. They were red, and there were a lot of zeros. $12 million. My heart stopped. The room started to spin. 12 million, I gasped. How Arthur began to speak rapidly, his voice low and urgent. Project Phoenix is a shadow corporation. It was set up 3 years ago. It used your personal assets as leverage to secure high-risk loans from private equity groups. Not normal banks, Harrison. Sharks. They used the house. They used your pension fund. They used the heavy machinery and the land deeds of Blake Construction as collateral. He clicked a few more keys, opening a document. And here is the worst part. The loans were authorized by the primary account holder. You. He pointed to a signature on the screen. It was my signature. The loops of the H, the sharp cross of the B. It looked exactly like mine. But I had never signed this. I had never seen this document in my life. I did not sign that, I said, my voice rising. That is a forgery. Arthur looked at me sadly. It was notarized, Harrison, by a notary who works for your son's legal team. And look at the cosigner. I looked. Below my fake signature was a real one. Preston Blake. Preston, I whispered. He has been bleeding the company dry, Arthur explained. He made bad bets on cryptocurrency and foreign real estate. When he lost the initial capital, he started borrowing against the company to try and win it back. He kept doubling down. This $12 million, it is due in full on Friday. If it is not paid, the creditors seize everything. The house, the company, your personal savings, everything. The puzzle pieces slammed together in my mind. The rush to sell the company, the rush to sell the house, the rush to put me in a nursing home and declare me incompetent. He is not selling the company to retire, I realized. He is selling it to cover the theft before the deadline. He is trying to cash out and run before the house of cards falls, and he needs me out of the way so I cannot stop the sale. Arthur nodded grimly. And if he sells the company on Friday, the new owners will inherit the debt. When they find out, they will sue. But Preston will be gone. And you, since your name is on the primary loan, you will be the one facing federal prison for fraud. I sat back, feeling like I had been punched in the gut. My son was not just greedy. He was framing me. He was going to let his father die in prison to save his own skin. Suddenly, Arthur's desk phone rang. It was a harsh, shrill sound in the quiet office. Arthur jumped. He looked at the caller ID. His eyes went wide. He looked at me, panic rising in his chest. It is the private client line, he whispered. It is Preston. Do not answer it, I said. I have to, Arthur stammered. If I do not, he will know something is wrong. He tracks the GPS on your phone, Harrison. He knows you are here. He picked up the receiver before I could stop him. His hand was shaking. Mr. Blake, Arthur said, his voice cracking slightly. Good morning. I could hear Preston's voice on the other end. It was loud, aggressive. I could hear the distortion, but I could make out the words. Is he there, Arthur? Is my father in your office? Arthur looked at me. I shook my head desperately. Arthur hesitated. He looked at the screen with the $12 million debt. He looked at his old friend. But then he looked at the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. Yes, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Yes, Mr. Blake. He is here. I felt betrayed. My stomach turned. Arthur was selling me out. Keep him there, Preston barked. Do not let him leave. I am in the lobby. I have security with me. The old man is having an episode. He is dangerous. We are coming back. Arthur hung up the phone. The color had returned to his face, but now it was flushed with fear. He is in the lobby, Arthur said. He has private security. He told the guards you are violent. If you walk out that door, they will tackle you. I stood up. I looked around the glass office. I was trapped. My son was outside with a team of hired muscle. He was going to drag me out of here, inject me with sedatives, and throw me into Golden Oaks before the ink on the sale contract was dry. "You have to help me, Arthur," I said. "You saw the signature. You know I did not do this." Arthur stood up. He walked over to the window that looked out into the lobby. He closed the blinds. Then he turned to me. He did not look like a banker anymore. He looked like the man who used to bluff me at poker. "I cannot stop him from coming in," Arthur said. "He has power of attorney on file. Security will let him through in 30 seconds. He walked over to the back wall of his office. There was a fire exit door marked with a red sign, but Arthur continued reaching into his pocket and pulling out a master key card. "I can delay him, and I can give you a head start." He swiped the card on the fire exit. The lock clicked open. "Go Harrison," he urged. "Take the back alley. It comes out on 4th Street. "What about the evidence?" I asked, pointing at the computer. "I need proof." Arthur grabbed a USB drive from his drawer. He plugged it in, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He downloaded the file. He yanked the drive out and pressed it into my hand. "Take it," he said. "But Harrison, be careful. This is not just fraud. People who steal $12 million do not mind adding murder to the list." I heard heavy footsteps approaching the office door. I heard Preston's voice shouting at a teller. "Get out of my way. My father is in there." I looked at Arthur one last time. "Thank you," I said. "Go," he shouted. I slipped through the heavy metal door just as the handle of the main office door began to turn. I heard the door crash open behind me. I heard Preston yell, "Where is he? Where is the old man?" I did not wait to hear the answer. I ran down the concrete hallway, the USB drive clenched in my fist like a grenade. I burst out into the alleyway, the rain hitting my face. I was alone. I was hunted. But for the first time since the funeral, I had a weapon. I ran toward my truck, but then I stopped. I saw a black SUV blocking the exit of the alley. 2 men in dark suits were standing by it, scanning the street. Preston's men. They had anticipated I might run. I ducked behind a dumpster, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could not go to my truck. They would be watching it. I could not go home. I could not go to the police, not when Preston had a court order declaring me insane. I was on the street. I had $200 in my wallet. I had a USB drive that could bring down an empire, and I had nowhere to go. Then I remembered the only other thing Catherine had written on the paper. The part I had almost missed. Find Sarah. Number 44 Oak Street. I did not know who Sarah was. I did not know why Catherine wanted me to find her. But as the men in suits started walking down the alley, checking behind crates and boxes, I knew she was my only hope. I pulled my collar up, bowed my head against the rain, and slipped into the shadows of the city I had built, praying that the foundation was strong enough to hold me one last time. The heavy steel fire door slammed shut behind us, cutting off the sounds of the bank lobby. But the silence in the concrete service corridor was even more terrifying. Arthur Henderson leaned against the wall, gasping for breath, his face slick with sweat. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like trapped flies, casting long, sickly shadows on the gray floor. We were safe for a moment, but only a moment. I looked at my old friend. Arthur was trembling. He was a man who lived by rules, by ledgers, by the predictability of compound interest. Breaking protocol like this, helping a fugitive, was tearing him apart. But he reached inside his suit jacket and pulled out a second folder. It was thinner than the loan documents he had given me on the USB drive. This one was paper. It was wrinkled as if he had been gripping it tight for days. "Take it," Arthur whispered, shoving the folder into my chest. "You need to see this. You need to know why she really died." My heart hammered against my ribs. I took the folder. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely lift the cover. Inside was a printout of our joint retirement account. The account Catherine and I had contributed to every single month for 40 years. The nest egg meant for travel, for medical bills, for peace. I looked at the balance. 0. A single transaction had drained the entire account. $500,000. Transferred to an offshore entity. The date on the transaction was Tuesday. 3 days ago. Tuesday, I whispered the word catching in my throat. That was the day Catherine died. Arthur grabbed my arm, his grip painful. She was here, Harrison. She came in on Tuesday morning. She had found out about the loans against the house, but she did not know about the cash accounts. She came to check the balance. She wanted to withdraw everything to hide it from Preston. He paused, swallowing hard tears welling up in his eyes. But it was already gone. When I told her the balance was 0, she collapsed in the chair. She could not breathe. But that is not what killed her, Harrison. It was what happened next. I stared at him, dread pooling in my stomach like ice water. What happened next? Preston came in, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a horrifying whisper. He had been tracking her phone. He walked right into my office. He did not help her. He did not call 911. He stood over her, Harrison. She was gasping for air, palm clutching her chest, and he leaned down and whispered to her. I felt the blood roar in my ears. What did he say? Arthur closed his eyes as if reliving a nightmare. He told her that if she told you, if she went to the police, he would ruin you. He told her he had already signed the papers to have you committed. He told her that you were the one who authorized the transfers, that he had forged your signature so well that you would go to prison for embezzlement. He told her that her choice was simple. Die quietly and let him take the money, or live and watch her husband die in a jail cell. I staggered back, hitting the cold concrete wall. The world tilted on its axis. My wife, my sweet, strong Catherine. She had not died of a stroke caused by old age. She had not died peacefully. She had been cornered, robbed, and threatened by the son she had given birth to. Her heart had given out under the weight of his cruelty. She tried to stand up. Arthur continued, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. She tried to slap him. She screamed at him to get out. That was when she fell. That was when her heart stopped. And he just watched Harrison. He checked his watch. He waited a full 2 minutes before he yelled for help. He let her die to protect his secret. A primal sound ripped from my throat, half sob, half growl. It was not a tragedy. It was manslaughter. It was a calculated execution using fear as the weapon. My son had murdered his mother for $500,000 and a clean getaway. Arthur looked at his watch. You have to go, he urged, pushing me toward the exit at the end of the hall. He will check the cameras. He will see we came this way. I looked at the folder in my hand. It was no longer just financial records. It was a murder weapon. It was the motive. Why did you not tell the police? I asked, my voice broken. Arthur looked down at his shoes. Because I was afraid, he admitted shamefully. He threatened me, too. He knows about my daughter's rehab payments. He said he would cut off her funding if I spoke. But I cannot sleep, Harrison. I see Catherine's face every time I close my eyes. Go. Make him pay. Do what I was too much of a coward to do. He shoved the heavy metal bar of the exit door. The gray light of the alley spilled in along with the sound of the relentless Seattle rain. Run, Harrison, Arthur shouted. I stumbled out into the alley. The door clanged shut behind me, sealing my friend back inside his prison of guilt. I stood alone in the narrow space between 2 brick buildings. The rain soaked through my shirt, instantly mixing with the cold sweat on my skin. I looked down at the papers in my hand. The ink was starting to blur from the raindrops, so I quickly shoved them deep inside my jacket, next to the cream-colored paper Catherine had left. I looked up at the strip of gray sky. I let the rain wash over my face, hoping it would wash away the image Arthur had planted in my mind. The image of Preston checking his watch while his mother died. the image of him whispering threats into the ear of a dying woman. I had thought I was fighting a thief. I had thought I was fighting a greedy child who wanted his inheritance early. I was wrong. I was fighting a monster, a sociopath who had weighed the life of his mother against a ledger and decided she was a liability to be liquidated. Rage, hot and blinding, replaced the fear in my veins. The trembling in my hands stopped. My heart, which had been racing with panic, settled into a slow, heavy rhythm. Thud, thud, thud. It was the rhythm of a war drum. I was 72 years old. I had no home. I had no money. I had a fugitive warrant likely being typed up right now. But I had the truth. I pulled my collar up against the wind. I was not just running away anymore. I was hunting. Preston Blake had made a mistake. He thought killing Catherine would silence her. He thought destroying me would erase the evidence. But he forgot one thing. He forgot that I was the one who taught him how to build things. And I knew exactly how to take them apart, brick by bloody brick. I turned and walked into the shadows of the alley, leaving the weeping Harrison Blake behind. The man who emerged onto the street was someone else entirely. Someone who would not stop until justice was served cold and hard as the pavement under my feet. The hunt was on. It took me an hour to get back to my neighborhood. I had to take 3 different buses and walk the last mile in the rain to make sure I was not being followed. I was soaked to the bone, shivering and exhausted. But as I turned the corner onto my street, the adrenaline kicked in again. I saw my house. The house I had designed on a napkin 40 years ago. The house where I raised my son. But it did not look like my home anymore. It looked like a crime scene. A police cruiser was parked in the driveway, its blue and red lights flashing silently against the gray sky. Next to it was a private ambulance, the engine idling, white smoke puffing from the exhaust. And standing on the front porch, looking like the picture of a concerned, heartbroken son, was Preston. He was talking to a police officer I recognized, Officer Miller, a good kid. I had hired his father to do the electrical work on the stadium project back in the 90s. Now Miller was standing there nodding sympathetically as my son spun a web of lies. I wanted to run. I wanted to turn around and disappear back into the city. But I couldn't. My truck, my 1978 Ford F-150, was in that garage. It was the only vehicle I owned that didn't have a GPS tracker or a computer system Preston could hack. It was old, mechanical, and reliable, just like me. I needed that truck if I was going to survive. I took a deep breath, straightened my spine, and walked up the driveway. Officer Miller saw me first. His hand went to his belt, not drawing his weapon, but resting there in a gesture of authority. "Mr. Blake," he called out, his voice firm but not unkind. "Please stop right there." Preston turned around. The performance he gave was worthy of an Academy Award. His face crumpled with relief. He ran down the steps, his arms open. "Dad!" "Oh, thank God. We were so worried. We thought you wandered onto the highway." He tried to hug me. I stepped back, revulsion rising in my throat like bile. If I let him touch me, I might snap his neck. "Do not touch me," I said, my voice low and dangerous. Preston stopped, looking hurt. He turned to the officer, his eyes wide with fake sadness. "See, officer, he is aggressive. He does not even recognize me. The dementia is progressing so fast." Dr. Sterling said this would happen. Officer Miller stepped between us, holding up a hand. "Mr. Blake, you need to calm down. Your son has filed an emergency order. We need to get you some help." I looked at Miller. I looked him right in the eye. "Son, I am not crazy. I am not sick. This man is stealing my company. He just killed his mother. You have to listen to me." Miller looked uncomfortable. He glanced at the paper in his hand. It was a court order. I could see the stamped seal from where I stood. Emergency conservatorship. Immediate custody. I am sorry, Mr. Blake Miller said gently, but the judge has signed the order. Legally, Preston is your guardian now. He says you are a danger to yourself. We have an ambulance here to take you to a facility where you can be safe. Two men in white uniforms stepped out of the back of the ambulance. They were big men. They did not look like nurses. They looked like bouncers. They started walking toward me carrying a restraint strap. I looked at Preston. He was standing behind the officer, and for a split second, the mask slipped. He smiled, a cold, triumphant smirk that said, "I won." I realized then that I could not talk my way out of this. Logic would not work. The law was on his side because he had bought the law. If those men got their hands on me, I would wake up in a padded room at Golden Oaks heavily sedated, and I would never see daylight again. I had to play his game. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face go slack. I grabbed my chest, letting out a small, breathless gasp. "Okay," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Okay. You win. I am confused. I just want to rest." Preston nodded, stepping forward again. "That is good, Dad. Just get in the ambulance. We will get you nice and warm." "I will," I said, leaning against the hood of the police car as if I could barely stand. "But please, my heart pills." I left them in the garage. On the workbench. I feel tight. I squeezed my eyes shut, grimacing. Officer Miller looked alarmed. He looked at Preston. "Does he have a heart condition?" Preston hesitated. He knew I took medication for blood pressure, but he did not know where I kept it. If he said no and I had a heart attack right here, it would look bad. "Yeah, he takes pills," Preston said quickly. "I will go get them." "No," I wheezed. "You do not know which ones. The blue bottle. In the lockbox. Only I know the combination. Please, just let me get them. It is right there." I pointed to the side door of the garage just 10 feet away. Officer Miller looked at the paramedics, then at me. He saw a frail, wet, defeated old man on the verge of collapse. "Let him get his pills," Miller said. "I will go with him." Preston narrowed his eyes. He didn't like it, but he couldn't argue with the police in front of witnesses. "Fine," Preston snapped, "but hurry up." I shuffled toward the garage door, dragging my feet. Miller walked right behind me. I opened the side door and stepped into the cool, dark smell of motor oil and sawdust. It was my sanctuary. The moment I crossed the threshold, I stopped acting. My 1978 Ford F-150 was parked in the center bay. It was a beast of a truck, heavy steel, lifted tires, a brush guard on the front that could knock down a brick wall. And unlike modern cars, you didn't need a fob to start it. You just needed the key, which I always left in the ignition because I never thought my own family would be the ones coming for me. "Mr. Blake, where are the pills?" Miller asked, looking around the workbench. "I am sorry, son," I said. I moved with a speed that surprised both of us. I slammed the side door shut and threw the deadbolt. Miller shouted from the outside, pounding on the door. I sprinted to the truck. I yanked the driver's door open and vaulted into the seat. I turned the key. The V8 engine roared to life with a thunderous growl that shook the tools on the walls. It was the sound of raw power. I looked through the windshield. The main garage door was closed. It was a heavy reinforced door. I shifted into reverse. I gunned the engine. Outside I could hear Preston screaming. He must have heard the engine. I did not hesitate. I did not think about the property damage. I thought about Catherine. I thought about the $12 million. I thought about the freedom I was about to lose. I slammed my foot onto the gas pedal. The truck surged backward. The tires squealed on the concrete. The rear bumper hit the garage door with the force of a battering ram. Wood splintered. Metal buckled. The door was ripped off its tracks with a deafening crash. I flew out of the garage in a shower of debris, the truck landing hard on the driveway. I saw Officer Miller dive out of the way. I saw the two paramedics scrambling for safety. And I saw Preston. He was standing near the ambulance, his mouth hanging open, his face pale with shock. I shifted into drive. I looked him right in the eye through the rain-streaked window. "I am not done yet, boy," I muttered. I floored it. The heavy tires tore up the perfectly manicured lawn Preston cared so much about. I clipped the side mirror of his expensive luxury sedan, sending it flying into the bushes. "Stop!" Police Miller shouted, reaching for his radio. But it was too late. I was already doing 40 miles per hour down the residential street. The old Ford roared like a lion released from a cage. I did not look back. I did not look at the house I would probably never see again. I turned onto the main road, merging into traffic, disappearing into the gray flow of the city. My heart was pounding, not from a heart attack, but from the wildest rush of adrenaline I had felt in decades. I was homeless. I was a fugitive. But I was free. And I had a full tank of gas. I reached into my pocket to make sure the papers were still there. They were. Next stop, Sarah. Whoever she was about to get a very unexpected visitor. The adrenaline that had fueled my escape finally burned out, leaving me shivering in a desolate truck stop on the edge of the city. I parked my Ford between two massive 18-wheelers, hoping their bulk would hide my old pickup from the road. The rain was unrelenting. It hammered against the metal roof of the cab, like handfuls of gravel, a constant deafening reminder that I was outside, exposed, and entirely alone. I turned off the engine. The silence that followed was heavy and cold. The heater fans spun down, and within minutes, the damp chill of the Seattle night began to creep through the door, seals settling into my bones. I sat there in the dark, gripping the steering wheel, until my knuckles turned white, waiting for sirens. Waiting for Preston. But there was nothing. Just the rhythmic sweep of the wipers on the trucks next to me and the distant hum of the highway. I needed to take stock of my life. I turned on the dim dome light, the yellow bulb casting long, eerie shadows across the cab. I pulled out my wallet. It was made of fine Italian leather, a gift from Catherine 3 Christmases ago. Now it felt like a relic from a dead civilization. I opened it. $212. That was it. That was the sum total of my liquid assets. My credit cards were in there, platinum and black cards with limits high enough to buy a small house, but they were useless pieces of plastic now. Preston would have flagged them the moment I drove off. If I used them, I might as well send up a flare. I took the cards out, one by one, and snapped them in half. It hurt to do it. Each snap felt like I was breaking a connection to the man I used to be. The man who ordered wine without looking at the price. The man who tipped waiters $50. That man was gone. Then there was the phone. It sat on the passenger seat, black and sleek. It was vibrating every few seconds. Messages from Preston. Messages from Tiffany. Maybe even messages from the police. It was not a phone anymore. It was a tracking device. I picked it up. My thumb hovered over the screen. I wanted to call someone. Anyone. I wanted to call my lawyer, but Preston had probably fired him already. I wanted to call my friends, but what would I say? That I was a fugitive sleeping in a truck, that my son was a thief and a killer. They would think I had lost my mind, just like the court order said. I powered it down. I used the small pin from my lapel to pop the SIM card tray open. I took the tiny chip the size of a fingernail and dropped it into the ashtray. Then I rolled down the window an inch and shoved the phone through the crack. It fell into a puddle of oil and rainwater on the asphalt. I was now completely off the grid. I leaned back against the headrest and closed my eyes. The reality of my situation crashed down on me with the weight of a collapsing roof. I was 72 years old. I had a bad back. I had high blood pressure. And I was homeless. My stomach rumbled a sharp, twisting pain. I had not eaten since breakfast. The hunger was not just physical, it was humiliating. Yesterday, I was the patriarch of the Blake family. Tonight, I was eyeing a half-eaten bag of stale crackers I had left in the glove compartment 6 months ago. I ate them. They tasted like dust and cardboard, but I swallowed them down, washing them away with a sip of lukewarm water from an old bottle rolling around on the floor. As the sugar from the crackers hit my blood, the tears finally came. They did not come with sobbing or wailing. They just leaked out of my eyes, hot and stinging. I missed Catherine. I missed her so much it felt like a physical hole in my chest. If she were here, she would know what to do. She would tell me to be brave. She would hold my hand and tell me that we had started with nothing before and we could do it again. But she was not here. She was in a cold grave and I was in a cold truck. The temperature dropped. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself, but the dampness was relentless. My knees ached, my hip throbbed. Every injury from 50 years of construction work came back to haunt me all at once. A dark thought whispered in my ear. It was the voice of weakness, the voice of a tired old man. "Go back," the voice said. "Just go back. Tell Preston you were confused. Tell him you had a panic attack. He will win. He will sell the company. He will put you in Golden Oaks. But at least you will be warm. You will have a soft bed. You will have hot food." Is that so bad? Is fighting really worth dying of pneumonia in a parking lot? My hand moved toward the ignition key. It was so tempting. Just to surrender. To admit that I was too old for this fight. To accept that the world belonged to the young and the ruthless now. I gripped the key. I could be home in 20 minutes. I could be warm. But then the image of Arthur Henderson's face flashed in my mind. The terror in his eyes when he talked about Catherine's death. Preston checking his watch while my wife gasped for air. If I went back, I would be shaking the hand of the man who killed my wife. I would be eating food paid for with her life insurance. I pulled my hand away from the key as if it were red hot. Number 1. I would rather freeze to death in this truck than accept charity from a monster. I needed a distraction. I needed to focus. I reached into my inside pocket and pulled out the only thing of value I had left. The cream-colored paper. I turned the dome light back on. I held the paper up, studying it. The code was there. Project Phoenix 8821. I ran my thumb over the paper. It felt different. The texture was changing. The humidity in the truck, the dampness from my wet coat, and the heat from the dashboard vent I had run earlier were affecting it. I squinted. There was something at the bottom corner. Something I had not seen in the bright fluorescent light of the bank or the dim living room. Catherine used to write notes to herself in lemon juice when we were kids, a silly game we played. But she also knew about chemically treated paper. She used to work for an archiving firm before we married. I held the paper closer to the warm light bulb of the dome light. The heat warmed the fibers. Slowly, incredibly faint blue letters began to appear in the bottom right margin. It was not invisible ink, but pressure writing that had been reacted to the moisture and heat. It was her handwriting, tiny and hurried. Find Sarah. Number 44 Oak Street. I stared at the name. Sarah. Who was Sarah? We did not know anyone named Sarah. Was she a lawyer, a witness, another banker? I looked at the address. Oak Street. That was in the old district, the part of town that had not been gentrified yet. It was a rough neighborhood. Not the kind of place Catherine would ever go. But she had written it. It was a lifeline thrown from the grave. I looked out the window. The rain was still falling, but the world did not look quite as dark anymore. I had a destination. I had a mission. I was not just a homeless old man hiding in a truck. I was a husband following his wife's final command. I put the paper back in my pocket, patting it gently. I adjusted the seat back, trying to get comfortable. I would not sleep much tonight, but I would rest, because tomorrow morning I was going to Oak Street. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in days, the sound of the rain sounded less like a hammer and more like a drum roll, the prelude to a battle, and I intended to be ready. The rain had turned the streets of the old district into rivers of black sludge by the time I found 44 Oak Street. It was not a house. It was a dilapidated brick building squeezed between a liquor store and a pawn shop, the kind of place where dreams went to die. A faded sign above the door read Sarah Jenkins Tax Services with the letter S hanging by a single rusty screw. This was where Catherine had sent me. This was my last hope. I parked the truck in the alley hidden behind a dumpster overflowing with wet cardboard. I pulled my collar up and stepped out, the cold biting at my exposed skin. I checked the street. No black SUVs, no police cruisers. Just a stray dog scavenging for food and the distant wail of a siren that made my heart skip a beat. I walked to the door and knocked. The sound was hollow, swallowed by the heavy timber. I waited. Nothing happened. I knocked again, harder this time, desperation lending strength to my tired arm. A voice came from behind the door, muffled and suspicious. "We are closed. Go away." I leaned close to the wood. "My name is Harrison Blake. Catherine sent me." There was a long silence. Then came the sound of chains rattling and deadbolts sliding back. The door opened a crack held by a security chain. A woman peered out. She was younger than I expected, maybe in her early 30s, but her eyes were old. They were tired, cynical eyes framed by dark circles and messy brown hair pulled back in a hasty bun. She wore an oversized sweater and held a cigarette in one hand, the smoke drifting out into the rain. "Harrison Blake," she repeated, looking me up and down. "You look like hell, Mr. Blake." "I feel like hell," I admitted. "Please, I have nowhere else to go." She hesitated, scanning the street behind me with the practiced paranoia of someone who is used to looking over her shoulder. Then she unhooked the chain and pulled the door open. "Get in, quickly." I stepped inside. The office smelled of stale coffee, cigarette smoke, and old paper. It was a single room cluttered with stacks of files, boxes of receipts, and 3 computer monitors glowing in the corner. It was a far cry from the glass-walled office at the bank, but right now, it felt like a fortress. Sarah locked the door behind us, throwing 3 different bolts. She led me to a worn-out armchair in the corner, sweeping a pile of tax forms onto the floor. "Sit," she commanded. She sat in her swivel chair, spinning around to face me. She took a drag of her cigarette and blew the smoke toward the ceiling. "So, Catherine is gone." "Yes," I said, the grief hitting me again like a physical blow. "She died 3 days ago." Sarah nodded slowly. She did not offer condolences. She just looked at the ash on her cigarette. She was a good woman. She was the only one who sent me a Christmas card every year, even after everything fell apart. She looked at me sharply. "Why are you here, Harrison?" "Catherine told me years ago that if you ever showed up at my door, it meant the worst had happened." "It has," I said. "My son, Preston. He has taken everything. The house, the company. He has filed a court order declaring me incompetent, and he has taken out $12 million in loans against my name." Sarah laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Of course he has. That sounds exactly like the Preston I remember." "You know him?" I asked, surprised. Sarah crushed her cigarette out in an overflowing ashtray. She leaned forward, her eyes hardening. "Know him, Mr. Blake? Look around you. Do you think I always worked in a dump like this? 5 years ago, I was a senior forensic auditor for one of the biggest firms in Chicago. I was on the fast track to partner. Then I found a discrepancy in the books of a construction conglomerate. A series of shell companies moving millions of dollars into offshore accounts. I reported it. I did my job. She paused, her jaw tightening. 2 days later, I was fired. They said I violated client confidentiality. They planted evidence on my computer. I lost my license. I lost my reputation. I lost my fiancée. I was blacklisted. No one would hire me. I ended up here doing tax returns for strippers and bartenders just to pay the rent. She looked at me, her gaze piercing. The client I audited was a subsidiary of a holding company. And do you know who sat on the board of that holding company? Do you know who made the call to have me destroyed? I shook my head, though I was beginning to dread the answer. Preston Blake, she spat. Your son. He was the silent partner. He ruined my life to cover up a $4 million bribe to a zoning commissioner. I sat back, stunned. I knew Preston was greedy. I knew he was cruel. But I had not realized how far his reach extended. He had destroyed this young woman's life years ago, just like he was trying to destroy mine now. He is doing it again, I said, my voice low. But this time it is not just bribes. It is money laundering. He calls it Project Phoenix. Sarah froze. The color drained from her face. Project Phoenix, she whispered. Are you sure? I nodded. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the cream-colored paper. I handed it to her. She took it as if it were a bomb. She smoothed it out on her desk, pushing aside a half-empty cup of coffee. She turned on a desk lamp, examining the paper closely. She looked at the code. She looked at the hidden message in lemon juice. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out a magnifying glass. This is not just a note, she muttered, her fingers flying across a keyboard. She woke up her computer system. The screens flickered to life, displaying lines of code that meant nothing to me. Sarah placed the paper on a flatbed scanner. She scanned it at the highest resolution. The image appeared on her center monitor. She began to apply filters to the image. Contrast, inversion, thermal layering. Suddenly the screen changed. The handwriting on the paper disappeared. In its place was a complex grid of dots and lines hidden within the fibers of the paper itself. It was a watermark, a digital steganography code. Sarah breathed, shaking her head in disbelief. You brilliant woman. She did not just write down a code. She embedded a digital key into the physical paper. What does it mean? I asked, leaning forward. Sarah typed rapidly. It is a decryption key, Harrison. It unlocks a private server. A server that does not officially exist. She hit enter. A loading bar appeared on the screen. My heart hammered in my chest. We were close. We were so close to the truth. The loading bar hit 100%. A login screen appeared. It was black with a single logo in the center. A red phoenix rising from ashes. Project Phoenix, I said. We found it. Sarah did not celebrate. She stopped typing. She sat back in her chair, her face pale. We found the door, Harrison. But we cannot open it. Why not? I asked. You have the code. You have the key. She pointed at the screen. Below the logo, a text box was flashing. But it did not ask for a password. It did not ask for a PIN. It asked for a biometric verification. Voice print required the screen read, or fingerprint scan. Identity primary administrator, Preston Blake. Sarah looked at me, her expression grim. This is a dead end, Harrison. To access this server to see where the money went and prove your innocence, we do not just need a hacker. We need Preston. We need his voice or his thumb. And considering he has a restraining order against you and a team of bodyguards, we might as well be trying to break into Fort Knox. I stared at the screen. The red phoenix seemed to mock me. We had the evidence, but it was locked behind a wall of technology I could not breach. I am not giving up, I said, though I felt the weight of defeat pressing down on me. There has to be a way. Sarah looked at the paper again. She picked it up, holding it to the light. Catherine knew about this, she said softly. She knew he would use biometrics. She would not have left you a key that you could not use. She turned the paper over. There was nothing there, just blank cream paper. But then Sarah's eyes narrowed. She rubbed the paper between her thumb and forefinger. "Wait," she said. "This feels uneven." She grabbed a small scalpel from her desk drawer. With the precision of a surgeon, she picked at the corner of the paper. It split. It was not one sheet of paper. It was two incredibly thin sheets pressed together. She peeled them apart. Sandwiched between the layers was not another note. It was a thin, transparent film. A plastic strip. Sarah held it up to the light. On the strip, pressed in ink that was almost invisible to the naked eye, was a smudge, a loop, a whorl. It was a fingerprint. "He must have touched the adhesive when he was setting up the files years ago," Sarah whispered. Catherine must have lifted it from his office. She kept his fingerprint. She placed the film on the scanner. She initiated a program. "Digital reconstruction in progress," the computer announced. We watched the bar load. 10%. 50%. "If this works," Sarah said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement, "we can clone his print. We can bypass the security. We can see everything." 90%. The computer beeped. Match confirmed. Sarah looked at me. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a woman who had been waiting 5 years for this moment. "Harrison," she said, "do you want to take down a billionaire?" I looked at the screen. I looked at the woman who had lost everything because of my son. And I looked at my own hands, the hands that built houses now ready to tear one down. "Let us burn him to the ground," I said. Sarah hit enter. The screen flashed green. Access granted. And then the files began to open. Thousands of them. Bank transfers, bribes, names of politicians, names of judges. And at the very top of the list, a folder titled Operation Friday Liquidation and Flight Plan. We were in. But as I read the first document, I realized that saving my company was the least of my worries. What Preston was planning for Friday was not just a sale, it was an explosion. And we were standing right in the blast zone. We drove to a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where truck drivers and insomniacs go to hide from the world. The neon sign outside buzzed with a dying flicker, casting a sickly red glow over the wet pavement. Inside, the air smelled of grease-burnt coffee and desperation. We took a booth in the far corner, away from the windows. Sarah opened her laptop immediately, the screen glowing blue in the dim light. I ordered 2 black coffees, my hands wrapping around the warm ceramic mug to stop them from shaking. Sarah typed furiously, her eyes scanning lines of data that scrolled past faster than I could read. We had breached the server. We were inside Project Phoenix, but understanding what we were looking at was a different matter entirely. "This is worse than I thought," Sarah murmured, taking a sip of coffee without looking away from the screen. "Harrison, this is not just simple theft. This is a complete liquidation." "Explain it to me," I said, leaning forward. "Keep it simple. I know bricks and mortar, not forensic accounting." Sarah turned the laptop toward me. She pointed to a column of red numbers. "See this? These are transfers. Every month for the last 2 years, Preston has been siphoning operating capital from Blake Construction. He started small. 50,000 here, 100,000 there. He categorized them as consulting fees or material costs for projects that never existed. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I trusted him. I signed those checks, or at least I thought I did. "He was using digital forgeries even then," Sarah said grimly. "But here is where it gets ugly. He was not spending the money on cars or vacations. He was funneling it into unregulated cryptocurrency exchanges. He was gambling Harrison. He was betting on volatile coins, thinking he could double the company's money and look like a genius. And he lost, I guessed. He lost everything, Sarah confirmed. He lost the initial $4 million in 6 months. That was when he started Project Phoenix. To cover the hole in the books, he took out the loans against your assets. He used the new money to try and win back the old money. It is the classic gambler's fallacy. And now the hole is $12 million deep. $12 million. The number echoed in my head. It was more than the company was worth. It was more than everything I had built in 50 years. But that is not the endgame, Sarah continued, her voice dropping lower. The loans are due on Friday. The creditors are not banks. They are private equity sharks. If they are not paid, they do not just foreclose. They break legs. Preston knows he cannot pay, so he has one final move left. She opened a new document. It was a contract. At the top in bold letters it read, "Sale and Purchase Agreement." "He is selling the company," I whispered. "He is selling it to Apex Global," Sarah said. "Your biggest competitor. And he is doing it for a fire sale price. $15 million. Just enough to pay off the sharks and keep a few million for himself to disappear with." I stared at the screen. Apex Global. They were a corporate giant known for buying family businesses, stripping them for parts, and firing the entire workforce. If they bought Blake Construction, my 200 employees, men and women I had known for decades, would be on the street in a month. "And look at the date," Sarah said, tapping the screen. "The closing is scheduled for Friday at noon. That is 36 hours from now. If he signs that paper," I said, "the company is gone. The debt is paid, but the legacy is destroyed." "No," Sarah corrected me sharply. "It is worse than that. Look at Clause 14. Liabilities. Retained by seller." I squinted at the fine print. Preston has structured the deal so that Apex buys the assets, but the liabilities, specifically the debt secured by personal guarantees, remain with the original owner. He is selling the buildings and the trucks, but he is leaving the debt with you. I sat back, the breath knocked out of me. He is going to take the $15 million cash pay himself and leave me with the $12 million debt, I realized. And since I am the primary guarantor, you go to prison for fraud, Sarah finished. And he walks away with a clean slate and a plane ticket to a country with no extradition treaty. I felt sick. It was evil. It was pure distilled evil. My son was not just sacrificing me. He was nuking my entire existence to save his own skin. "We have to go to the police," I said, standing up. "We have the files. We have the proof. Sit down, Harrison." Sarah hissed, grabbing my arm. "We cannot go to the police. Not yet." "Why not?" "This proves everything." "Because this is digital evidence obtained illegally," she whispered fiercely. "We hacked a private server. Any decent lawyer, and Preston has a team of them, will get this thrown out of court in 5 minutes. And even if they did investigate, a financial fraud case takes months to build. By the time the police freeze the assets, the sale will be over. Preston will be in the Cayman Islands, and you will be in a cell." I slumped back into the booth. "So we are helpless. We just watch him burn it all down." Sarah chewed on her lip, thinking. Her eyes darted back and forth. "We need something physical," she said. "We need a way to stop the sale legally." "Is there anything else? Does Preston have full authority?" "He has the power of attorney," I said bitterly. "And the emergency guardianship. He is effectively me." "But the company," Sarah pressed. "Is there a corporate charter, a shareholder agreement, something that limits his power?" I shook my head. Catherine and I were the only shareholders. When she died, her shares went to... I stopped. My heart skipped a beat. "Catherine's shares," I whispered. "What about them?" Sarah asked. "Catherine never trusted lawyers," I said slowly. a memory surfacing from the fog of grief. 20 years ago, when we incorporated, she insisted on a clause, a poison pill. We wrote a founder's agreement. It states that in the event of the death of one spouse, the surviving spouse must have the physical original share certificates to transfer ownership. And it says that if the surviving spouse is incapacitated, the shares automatically transfer to a blind trust, not to the next of kin. Sarah's eyes widened. That blocks the sale. If the shares are in a trust, Preston cannot sell the company. Apex Global would never sign a deal if the title is not clear. But we need the document. I said, the hope draining out of me. The original agreement. It was in the safe at the office. Preston has definitely destroyed it by now. Sarah looked at me intently. Think Harrison. Catherine left you that note. She hid the digital key in her jewelry box. Would she have left the most important document in an office safe where Preston could find it? I thought about Catherine. My clever, careful Catherine. She knew Preston was snooping. She knew he was dangerous. No, I said. She would not. She would hide it somewhere he would never look. Somewhere he hates. Where Sarah asked. The wall safe, I said. In the master bedroom. Sarah slumped. Harrison, the master bedroom is the first place he would look. No, I said, a grim smile forming on my face. Not this safe. It is behind the painting of the dogs. The one Preston calls tacky. He hates that painting. He has been trying to get me to throw it away for years. He never looks at it. He certainly would never touch it. I closed my eyes, visualizing the room. The painting of 3 golden retrievers playing poker. It was a joke gift from Catherine on my 50th birthday. It hung right next to the bed. Behind it was a small fireproof wall safe. Preston thinks he cleared out the room, I said. He threw away the clothes, the trinkets. But he would leave the furniture and the art for the staging. He wants the house to look furnished for the sale. The painting is still there. And the combination, Sarah asked. Our anniversary, I said. 8/14/71. Sarah closed the laptop. Her face was set in a hard line. We have a plan, she said. We get that document. We walk into that signing ceremony on Friday, and we slam it on the table. We kill the deal. But there is a problem. I said, looking out the window at the rain. The document is inside the house. The house where Preston is living, Sarah said. The house surrounded by private security. The house that the police are watching because a fugitive lunatic just drove a truck through the garage door. Yes, I said. That house. Sarah looked at me. She reached across the table and put her hand on mine. Her hand was small and cold, but her grip was strong. You are going to have to break in, Harrison. You are going to have to become a criminal to prove you are innocent. I looked at my hands. They were rough, scarred, the hands of a builder. I had spent my life putting up walls to keep people safe. Now I had to tear one down. I know how to get in, I said. I built that house. I know every weakness. But you cannot just walk in the front door, Sarah said. I know, I said. I will need supplies, rope, tools, and a distraction. I finished my coffee. It was cold and bitter, but it tasted like resolve. We have 36 hours, I said. Let us go shopping. We stood up and walked out of the diner, leaving a few crumpled dollar bills on the table. The rain was still falling, but the fear was gone. I had a target. I had a map. And for the first time since Catherine died, I felt alive. I was going home, not as a father, not as an owner, but as a thief in the night, and God help anyone who stood in my way. The smell of pine lumber and cold steel hit me the moment the automatic doors slid open. For 50 years, this scent was my cologne. It was the smell of progress, of contracts signed and foundations poured. I had spent millions of dollars in stores like this, buying materials to build skyscrapers and family homes. Today, I walked in with a crumpled wad of bills in my pocket, looking for the tools to commit a felony. I grabbed a shopping cart. The wheel squeaked a high-pitched rhythm that matched the frantic beating of my heart. I kept my head down, pulling my wet coat collar up to hide my face. I did not want to run into a former foreman or a supplier who might recognize Harrison Blake, the respected developer, looking like a drowned rat. I went straight to aisle 4, hardware and fasteners. I did not look at the hammers. I did not look at the drills. I needed silence. I needed stealth. I picked up a coil of nylon rope, black, 500-pound test weight. Enough to hold an old man's weight, but thin enough to coil around my waist. Next was duct tape, the industrial kind. Not for fixing leaks, but for taping glass so it would not shatter when I broke it. I moved to the tool section. My hand hovered over a heavy-duty crowbar. It was painted blue cold and heavy in my hand. It was a tool of destruction, a tool for prying things open that wanted to stay shut. I weighed it in my palm. It felt familiar. It felt right. Harrison. Sarah's voice was a whisper at my elbow. She was looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. She looked at the crowbar, then at the rope. "This is madness," she hissed, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "You are talking about scaling a wall. You are talking about breaking into a second-story window. Look at your hand." I looked down. My hand was trembling. The crowbar was shaking in my grip. "It is just the cold," I lied. "It is not the cold," Sarah said, reaching out to touch my arm. "You are pale. Your lips are blue. You need a hospital, not a hardware store. You are going to have a heart attack before you even get up the trellis." I pulled my arm away. A sharp pain like a serrated knife twisted behind my sternum. I gritted my teeth, forcing the air into my lungs. I knew she was right. My chest felt tight like a vice was slowly closing around my ribs. I had not taken my medication in 24 hours. My blood pressure was probably high enough to stroke out right here in aisle 4. But I did not have a choice. "I am fine," I grunted, tossing the crowbar into the cart. It landed with a loud clang that made a nearby shopper look over. I stared him down until he turned away. "I am not asking you to climb the wall, Sarah," I said, leaning on the cart for support. "I just need you to drive the getaway car. I built that house. I know where the weak points are. I know that the trellis on the north side is bolted into the brick, not the siding. It will hold me." Sarah shook her head, running a hand through her damp hair. "And what if the alarm goes off? What if the private security shoots you?" "Harrison, this is suicide. We can find another way. We can try to hack the biometric scanner again. We do not have time." I snapped my patience, fraying along with my nerves. "The sale is tomorrow at noon. If we do not get that document tonight, it is over. Preston wins. Catherine died for nothing." I saw the hurt in her eyes and I softened my tone. "Sarah, look at me. I have nothing left. No home, no wife, no dignity. All I have is this chance. If I die in that house, at least I die fighting. Is that not better than dying in a nursing home drooling on myself while my son spends my money?" She looked at me for a long moment. She saw the resolve in my eyes. She saw the stubbornness that had built a company from nothing. She sighed, defeated. "We need glass cutters," she said, pointing to the shelf behind me. "If you break the window with the crowbar, the noise will alert the guards. Use a diamond tip cutter. Score it. Tap it. Tape it." I smiled weakly. "You know a lot about breaking and entering for an accountant." She shrugged, grabbing the tool and tossing it into the cart. "I watch a lot of crime documentaries. And get some gloves. Leather. You do not want to leave prints." We walked to the checkout counter. The cashier was a teenager with acne and a name tag that hung crookedly on his vest. He scanned the items. Rope, tape, crowbar, glass cutter, gloves, A ski mask. It was a starter kit for a burglary. The kid did not even blink. He popped his gum and looked at the total. $184.50, he drawled. I opened my wallet. I pulled out the damp bills. I counted them out on the counter. 20s, 10s, 5s. I had exactly $190 left. I handed the money over. My hand shook as I gave away my last lifeline. I was now destitute. I had $5.50 to my name. Keep the change, I said. We walked out into the parking lot. The rain had stopped, but the fog had rolled in thick and gray. We loaded the supplies into the back of Sarah's battered sedan. I leaned against the car, feeling the adrenaline crash. The pain in my chest was a dull throb now, a constant reminder of my mortality. I closed my eyes, visualizing the layout of the house. The master bedroom was on the second floor facing the garden. The trellis was covered in ivy. It was steep. I can do this, I whispered to myself. I have to do this. Sarah sat in the driver's seat, her phone glowing in her hand. She was checking the surveillance feeds she had managed to tap into earlier, the ones connected to the street cameras. Suddenly, she sat up straight. Harrison, she said, her voice sharp. Get in the car. What is it? I asked, sliding into the passenger seat. Did they find us? No, she said, turning the screen toward me. Look at this. I looked at the phone. It was a social media post, an Instagram invitation. It was posted by Tiffany. The image was a picture of my living room, now redecorated with modern, soulless furniture. There were balloons. There were bottles of champagne. The caption read, "Gnawed free of the clutter. Come celebrate our new chapter at the Blake residence. Housewarming and pre-sale party. Tonight at 8 p.m. I stared at the screen. A party. Tonight. They are celebrating, I said, my voice dripping with disgust. They are dancing on Catherine's grave before the dirt is even settled. Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide with a realization. Don't you see, she said. A party. That means people coming in and out. That means noise, music, laughter. I nodded slowly, the gears in my mind turning. And it means the perimeter alarm will be disabled, I said. They cannot have the alarm armed if guests are walking in and out of the garden doors. Sarah grinned. It was a fierce, predatory grin. It is a Trojan horse, Harrison. We do not have to sneak past a silent armed fortress. We just have to slip in while they are drunk and bragging about their money. I looked at the time on the dashboard. 7:15. The party starts in 45 minutes. I felt a surge of energy. The pain in my chest receded, replaced by a cold, hard focus. Preston had made a mistake. His arrogance was his weakness. He was so sure he had won, so sure I was helpless, that he was throwing a party to gloat. He was inviting the wolf right to the door. Drive, I said to Sarah. Take me home. She started the engine. The car sputtered to life. We pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the hardware store behind. I touched the tools in the back seat. The rope, the tape, the crowbar. I was not a builder anymore. Tonight, I was a thief, and I was going to steal back the only thing that mattered. We drove into the fog, heading toward the wealthy suburbs, toward the house that was no longer a home but a battlefield, and the party was just about to begin. The bass from the stereo system thumped against the brick exterior of the house, a rhythmic vibration that I could feel all the way down in the soles of my wet boots. Inside, people were laughing. I could hear the clinking of glasses and the murmur of conversation, the sounds of a celebration paid for with my stolen life. I stood in the shadows of the rhododendron bushes, the same ones I had planted with Catherine 20 years ago, and looked up at the north wall. To anyone else, the side of the house was a sheer cliff of red brick, but to me, it was a ladder. I knew that the copper drain pipe running down from the master bedroom gutter was not just decorative. When we built this house, the architect wanted to use cheap aluminum brackets. I refused. I made the crew use heavy-duty steel anchors drilled 6 inches deep into the masonry. I had brazed the joints myself. I knew that pipe could hold 500 pounds because I had tested it. I coiled the nylon rope around my waist and pulled on the leather gloves. My chest was tight, a dull ache that radiated down my left arm, reminding me that I was 72 years old and running on adrenaline and caffeine. But I pushed the pain aside. I reached up and grabbed the cold copper. It held firm. I began to climb. It was not like the movies. There was no grace in it. It was a grunt of effort with every pull. My shoulders screamed in protest. The rough brick scraped against my knees. The rain made the metal slick, and twice my foot slipped, leaving me dangling by my arms, swinging in the dark, while the music pounded below. But I kept going. I thought about the $12 million. I thought about the nursing home. I thought about Catherine. I reached the second-story window ledge. I was gasping for air, sweat stinging my eyes. I peered through the glass. The master bedroom was dark, illuminated only by the light spilling in from the hallway. I pulled the glass cutter from my pocket. I taped the window in a grid pattern with the duct tape just like Sarah had told me. I pressed the diamond tip against the glass and scored a circle near the latch. Then, with the butt of the crowbar, I tapped it. Crack. The sound seemed deafening to me like a gunshot in a library. I froze, pressing myself flat against the brick, waiting for a scream. But inside, the music just switched to a louder pop song. No one had heard. I punched the circle of glass in, reached through, and unlocked the latch. I slid the window up and tumbled onto the carpet. I was in. The room smelled wrong. It used to smell of Catherine's lavender potpourri and my old leather books. Now it smelled of industrial cleaner and cheap cologne. I stood up, adjusting my eyes to the gloom. The room had been staged. Our comfortable, worn armchair was gone, replaced by a stiff, modern white chair. The photos on the dresser were gone. It was a showroom, devoid of soul. Suddenly, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Voices. They were getting louder. I looked for a place to hide. The bed was too low. The curtains were too sheer. The closet. I scrambled across the room and threw myself into the walk-in closet, pulling the louvered doors shut just as the bedroom door swung open. The light in the bedroom flipped on. Through the slats of the closet door, I saw them. It was Tiffany. She was wearing a red dress that cost more than my first car, and with her was not my son. It was Marcus, the lead attorney for the sale. The man who was supposed to be representing the family's interests. Tiffany laughed, a sound that was sharp and cruel. She pushed Marcus onto the bed where Catherine and I had slept for 30 years. "Lock the door," she whispered. "Preston is downstairs, making a toast to himself. He loves the sound of his own voice too much to come up here." Marcus chuckled, loosening his tie. He walked over and clicked the lock. "He is a useful idiot, I will give him that," Marcus said. "He actually believes he is going to keep the proceeds from the sale." Tiffany poured 2 glasses of wine from a bottle on the dresser. "Let him believe it until Friday," she said. "Once the money hits the offshore account, we will transfer our cut and leave him to deal with the debt. By the time he realizes what happened, we will be in Brazil." I pressed my hand over my mouth to stop myself from gasping. The betrayal went deeper than I thought. Preston was the villain in my story, but he was also the victim in theirs. They were all sharks eating each other in a frenzy of greed. "What about the old man?" Marcus asked, taking the glass. "Is he really going to be a problem?" Tiffany waved her hand dismissively. "Harrison, Lees. He is probably freezing in a ditch somewhere right now. But even if he shows up, it does not matter. The court order is signed." She sat on the edge of the bed, crossing her legs. "I spoke to Dr. Sterling at the facility this morning," she continued. As soon as the police catch him, they are going to administer a heavy dose of haloperidol. He will be so sedated he won't even know his own name, let alone be able to testify about a forged signature. We will stash him in the long-term ward. He will be a vegetable, Marcus. A silent, drooling vegetable. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach that was heavier than fear. They were not just planning to lock me up. They were planning to lobotomize me chemically. They were going to erase my mind, to cover their tracks. I gripped the crowbar in the dark. I wanted to burst out. I wanted to smash their kneecaps. I wanted to scream. But I stayed still. Violence would only get me arrested. I needed the document. I needed the kill switch. They finished their wine. They laughed about how easy it was to manipulate Preston. Then mercifully, Tiffany stood up. "We should go back down," she said. "If we are gone too long, he might actually come looking. Not because he misses me, but because he needs me to smile for the investors." They unlocked the door and left, switching off the light. The room plunged back into darkness. I waited a full minute, counting the beats of my racing heart. 60, 1, 2. I pushed the closet door open and stepped out. My legs were stiff. I walked over to the wall next to the bed. The painting was still there. Dogs playing poker. It was tacky. It was ridiculous. And it was the only thing in the room that felt like home. I lifted the heavy frame down and set it on the bed. Behind it, the wall safe sat flush against the plaster. I spun the dial. Right to 8, left to 14, right to 71. Click. The handle turned. The heavy steel door swung open. I reached inside my fingers, searching for the thick parchment envelope that held the founder's agreement. The document that proved I controlled the company. The document that would stop the sale and send them all to prison. My hand closed around air. I felt around the metal interior. Top shelf, bottom shelf, empty. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced my chest. "No," I whispered. "No. It has to be here." I pulled my phone out. No, I didn't have a phone. I pulled a small pen light from my pocket that I had bought at the store. I shined it into the safe. It was completely empty. No cash. No jewelry. No certificate. Had Preston found it? Had Tiffany taken it? If they had it, the game was over. They would have burned it. I slumped against the wall, the strength leaving my legs. We were too late. Catherine had tried to protect it, but they had found it. But then the beam of my light caught something in the very back corner of the safe. A small white rectangle. It was not the certificate. It was an index card. I reached in and pulled it out. On the card, in Catherine's handwriting, were just 4 words. County Court. File 1985. I stared at the card. 1985. That was the year Preston was 10 years old. That was the year... I stopped. A memory flickered in the back of my mind. A dark memory I had buried decades ago. A trouble. A legal issue involving the business and a piece of land. But we had settled it. The files were sealed. Why would the share certificate be in a court file from 40 years ago? And then I understood. Catherine knew the house was not safe. She knew the bank was not safe. So she had hidden the most important document in the one place no one could destroy, because it was already in the custody of the government. She had misfiled it. She had slipped it into an old sealed case file that was sitting in the basement of the county clerk's office. It was brilliant. It was insane. And it meant I had to break into a government building. I shoved the card into my pocket. I put the painting back on the wall. I heard the doorknob rattle. Someone was coming back. I scrambled to the window. I threw my legs over the sill and grabbed the drainpipe. As I slid down into the darkness, the rain stinging my face, I realized the night was far from over. I had escaped the tiger's den, but now I had to walk into the lion's mouth. Next stop, the county courthouse, and I had until morning before the archives opened or before I had to kick the door down. I shoved the index card deep into my breast pocket, right next to the beating of my frantic heart. That small piece of paper was the only weapon I had left. I took a breath to steady my shaking hands and moved toward the bedroom door. I could still hear the thumping bass of the party downstairs, a rhythmic reminder that the house was full of witnesses. If I could just slip into the hallway and make it to the back stairs, I could disappear into the night before anyone knew I had been there. I turned the knob slowly. I opened the door an inch. The hallway seemed empty. I stepped out, my boots silent on the plush carpet I had paid for 3 years ago. But I did not make it 2 steps. A figure stepped out from the shadows of the linen closet. It was not a guard. It was not a guest. It was Preston. He was holding a half-empty glass of scotch. His tie was undone and his face was flushed with the arrogant glow of a man who thinks he is untouchable. He did not look surprised to see me. He looked amused. "Hello, Dad," he said, his voice smooth and dripping with malice. "I was wondering when you would show up. I saw the mud on the trellis. You really are predictable." I froze. I looked past him toward the stairs. He was blocking the only exit. "Get out of my way, Preston," I said, my voice low and dangerous. He laughed, taking a sip of his drink, or what? "You will hit me with your cane. You are trespassing, old man. I could call the police right now and have them shoot you on sight. They are already looking for the dangerous fugitive who drove a truck through a garage door." He took a step closer, crowding me. He smelled of expensive alcohol and rot. "But I am not going to call them yet," he whispered. "I want to savor this. I want to see the look on your face when you realize you have lost. Did you open the safe? Did you find what you were looking for?" I kept my hand over my pocket. I said nothing. He smirked. "It is empty, isn't it? I burned that founder's agreement 2 days ago. I watched it turn to ash in the fireplace, just like I watched Mom's hope burn out in her eyes." My blood ran cold. He was talking about Catherine. "You killed her," I said. My voice was trembling, not with fear, but with a rage so hot it felt like it was melting my ribs. "You watched her die." Preston shrugged, a casual gesture that made me want to tear his throat out. "I did not kill her, Dad. I just facilitated nature. She was going to find out about the money. She was going to ruin everything. So when she started gasping for air, when she reached for her nitro pills, I just moved the bottle." I stared at him. The world seemed to stop spinning. "You moved the bottle," I whispered. "Just a few inches," he said, smiling cruelly. "Just to the top shelf. She was too weak to reach it. She tried, though. She clawed at the air. It was pathetic, really. But it had to be done. It was survival of the fittest, and let us be honest, she was past her prime. Just like you." Something inside me snapped. It was not a conscious thought. It was a primal explosion. The father in me died in that moment. The builder died. The only thing left was a soldier. I did not scream. I did not cry. I moved. I grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the hallway console table. It was solid metal, weighing at least 10 pounds. Preston saw the look in my eyes, and for the first time his smile faltered. He raised his hand. "Hey, calm down," he started to say. I swung the lamp with every ounce of strength left in my 72-year-old body. I put 50 years of swinging hammers into that blow. I put the grief of a widower and the rage of a betrayed father into it. The base of the lamp connected with his knee. There was a sickening crunch of bone shattering. Preston screamed. It was a high, thin sound that cut through the music downstairs. He crumpled to the floor, clutching his leg, the scotch glass shattering around him. "You crazy old freak!" he shrieked, writhing in agony. I stood over him, breathing hard. I raised the lamp again. I wanted to finish it. I wanted to smash his skull. But then I heard footsteps thundering up the stairs. The music had stopped. People were shouting. "Mr. Blake, is everything okay?" "Security, they were coming." I dropped the lamp. I could not fight a team of armed guards. I had the index card. I had to protect the mission. I turned and ran back into the bedroom. I locked the door, but I knew the cheap wood would not hold for long. I heard bodies slamming against it from the other side. "Open up, security." I ran to the window. I looked at the drainpipe. It was too slow. They would be in the room in 10 seconds. I could not climb down fast enough. I looked down at the garden. It was a 15-foot drop to the rhododendron bushes. Below that was wet earth. I had no choice. I climbed onto the sill. The rain lashed at my face. Behind me, the bedroom door splintered. A guard's hand reached through to unlock it. "For Catherine," I whispered. I pushed myself off the ledge. For a second, I was flying. Then gravity took hold. I hit the bushes. Branches whipped my face, tearing at my skin. I crashed through the foliage and slammed into the ground. A snap echoed in the night louder than the thunder. Pain, white and blinding, shot up my right leg. I gasped, rolling onto my back in the mud. My leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. It was broken, badly. I tried to stand, but the world went black for a second. I fell back down, groaning. Up on the balcony, I saw flashlights cutting through the rain. He jumped. "He is in the garden." "Get the dogs." Dogs. They had guard dogs. I dragged myself by my elbows. The mud sucked at my clothes. Every inch was agony. I crawled toward the edge of the property, toward the dark road. My vision was blurring. I was going to pass out. I was going to die here in the mud, just yards away from freedom. Suddenly, a pair of headlights swept over me, blindingly bright. An engine roared. It was not a police car. It was my truck, my Ford F-150. It jumped the curb, smashing through the white picket fence Preston had installed. It tore up the lawn mud flying from the tires. The truck skidded to a halt right next to me. The passenger door flew open. Sarah was behind the wheel. She looked terrified. "Get in," she screamed. "Get in, now." I reached up, grabbing the door handle. I could not use my legs. I pulled with my arms, my muscles screaming. Sarah leaned over, grabbing my coat collar, hauling me up with surprising strength. I tumbled into the cab, my broken leg dragging over the metal sill. I screamed in pain, black spots dancing in my eyes. Sarah slammed the door shut and stomped on the gas. The truck fishtailed in the mud, the rear tires spinning wildly before finding traction. We shot forward, just as two German shepherds burst through the bushes, their jaws snapping at the tires. We hit the pavement and accelerated. I looked in the side mirror. Guards were running down the driveway, guns drawn. I saw muzzle flashes. Pop, pop. The back window of the truck shattered, spraying us with safety glass. Head down, Sarah yelled, swerving the truck left and right. We took the corner on two wheels. The heavy truck groaned but held the road. We sped down the dark suburban street, leaving the chaos of the Blake mansion behind. I slumped against the seat, clutching my leg. The pain was a living thing, eating me alive. But I reached into my pocket. The index card was still there. Dry. Safe. We did it. I wheezed, my voice sounding like gravel. Sarah looked at me, her face pale in the dashboard light. She saw my leg. She saw the blood soaking my pants. "Harrison, your leg," she said, her voice shaking. "We need a hospital." "No hospital," I gritted out through clenched teeth. "Preston will check the emergency rooms. He has the police looking for me. If we go to a hospital, I am a dead man." "But you are in shock," Sarah cried. "You need a doctor." "Just drive, Sarah," I commanded, forcing myself to stay conscious. "Drive to the county courthouse. We have a file to find." We tore through the night, the old engine roaring, the wind whistling through the broken window. Behind us, I heard the wail of sirens getting louder. The hunt was still on. I was broken, bleeding, and hunted, but I had the key to the truth, and I would crawl over broken glass to use it. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale justice. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed with a headache-inducing flicker, casting a sickly pallor over the mahogany benches. I sat in my wheelchair, at the back of the room, hidden in the shadows of the vestibule, watching the final act of my own destruction play out through the crack in the double doors. Sarah stood behind me, her hands gripping the handles of my chair so tight her knuckles were white. My broken leg throbbed in rhythm with my heartbeat, a jagged line of fire running from my ankle to my knee, but I forced myself to focus. Pain was just noise. This was the signal. Inside the courtroom, my son was putting on the performance of a lifetime. Preston stood before the bench, leaning heavily on a pair of aluminum crutches. He had wrapped his knee in a thick ace bandage, though I knew for a fact I had hit his shin, not his knee. He looked tragic. He looked like the dutiful, heartbroken son who had been forced to make the impossible choice to institutionalize his violent, senile father. "Your Honor," Preston said, his voice trembling with practiced emotion. "It breaks my heart to be here. My father built this company from the ground up. He was a great man. But the dementia, it has turned him into someone I do not recognize. Last night he attacked me in my own home. He broke into the house, delirious, screaming about conspiracies. He assaulted me with a lamp. I barely escaped with my life." He gestured to his bandaged leg. A murmur of sympathy rippled through the courtroom. The lawyers from Apex Global, the company buying my life's work, nodded solemnly. They wanted this over. They wanted the signature so they could carve up Blake Construction before lunch. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, looked down at Preston with pity. She shuffled the papers on her desk. The medical report, the restraining order, the police report from the incident at the garage. It was a mountain of evidence against a ghost. "I understand, Mr. Blake," the judge said, her voice softening. "The court sympathizes with your difficult position. Given the evidence of violent outbursts and the medical evaluation of advanced cognitive decline, I am inclined to grant the permanent conservatorship immediately. We need to ensure your father is placed in a secure facility for his own safety and the safety of the public." She picked up her gavel. She reached for her pen to sign the order that would strip me of my rights, my freedom, and my name. And furthermore, she continued regarding the sale of Blake Construction. "Since the primary shareholder is incapacitated, I am authorizing the immediate transfer of assets to satisfy the outstanding debts." Preston bowed his head, hiding a smirk. He had won. He had killed his mother, framed his father, and was about to walk away with millions. Now I whispered to Sarah. Sarah kicked the double doors open. They swung wide with a loud wooden boom that echoed like a cannon shot. The entire courtroom jumped. Heads whipped around. The judge froze her pen, hovering inches above the paper. "Harrison Blake is present, Your Honor," Sarah shouted, her voice ringing clear and fearless. "And he is not incapacitated. He is just waking up." She pushed my wheelchair forward. The wheels squeaked on the linoleum floor. I sat up straight, ignoring the agony in my leg. I looked terrible. My clothes were torn and muddy. My face was scratched from the bushes. I looked exactly like the madman Preston claimed I was. But my eyes were clear. "Order," the judge shouted, banging her gavel. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" "Bailiff, remove these people." Preston spun around on his crutches. His eyes went wide. For a second he looked terrified, but he recovered quickly. "Your Honor," he cried, pointing a shaking finger at me. "That is him, that is my father. He is dangerous. He escaped custody. Do not let him near me." Two bailiffs started moving toward us, their hands on their tasers. I did not scream. I did not fight. I simply reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the cream-colored paper. The paper Preston had thrown in the trash. The paper that had started this war. "I am not here to fight, Your Honor," I said, my voice raspy but loud enough to reach the bench. I am here to submit evidence into the record, evidence regarding the true ownership of Blake Construction. The judge narrowed her eyes. Mr. Blake, you are not represented by counsel. You have been deemed mentally unfit. Anything you say. I am not unfit, I interrupted the command in my voice, stopping the bailiffs in their tracks. And this company does not belong to me. It never did. Preston laughed nervously. Your Honor, he is rambling. He thinks he is the President of the United States. Please take him away before he hurts someone. It belonged to my wife, I continued, wheeling myself closer to the bar. Catherine Blake. And she was not just a housewife, Preston. She was not just a bookkeeper. I looked at my son. I saw the confusion in his eyes. He did not know, he had never known. Sarah stepped forward. She pulled a small, high-intensity UV flashlight from her pocket. Your Honor. Sarah said this document appears to be a standard promissory note, but it is not. It is a federal instrument. She clicked the light on. The purple beam hit the cream paper. A collective gasp went through the room. Under the ultraviolet light, the blank space at the bottom of the paper glowed. A complex, intricate seal appeared in bright blue luminescence. It was an eagle holding arrows and an olive branch, and below it a signature that we all recognized, but next to it a code number. FBI Witness Protection Program, case number 1990-Alpha. The judge stood up. She leaned over the bench, her eyes wide behind her glasses. What is this? She demanded. My wife Catherine was not who you thought she was, I said, staring directly at Preston. Before she met me, she was a forensic accountant for the federal government. She testified against the cartel in 1990. She was placed in protection. This company, Blake Construction, it was built with federal grant money allocated for her new identity. I handed the paper to the bailiff, who took it gingerly, as if it were radioactive. He handed it to the judge. Read the clause under the seal, Your Honor, I said. The judge adjusted her glasses. She read aloud, her voice shaking slightly. Pursuant to the Federal Witness Protection Act, any assets generated by the protected witness are subject to immediate federal freeze if the designated heir is found to be involved in criminal enterprise, money laundering, or organized crime. Jurisdiction falls immediately to the Department of Justice. The room went dead silent. Preston dropped one of his crutches. It clattered loudly on the floor. Criminal enterprise, Preston stammered, his face turning the color of chalk. That is ridiculous. I am a businessman. This is a forgery? Is it? Sarah challenged. Because we have the logs from Project Phoenix. We have the transfer records showing you laundering money through this company for the last 3 years. And by attempting to sell these assets today, you just triggered a federal trap. The judge looked at the paper. She looked at Preston. She looked at the lawyers from Apex Global who were frantically packing their briefcases, trying to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout. Mr. Blake, the judge said to Preston, her voice icy. Is this your mother's signature? Preston opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the paper. He saw the seal. He realized that the woman he had killed, the woman he thought was a weak-old hoarder, had been a woman who took down cartels. She had been playing a game he didn't even know existed. The judge banged her gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. This hearing is suspended, she declared. The assets of Blake Construction are hereby frozen under federal jurisdiction. The guardianship order is vacated pending a federal investigation. She pointed her gavel at the bailiffs. And do not let Mr. Preston Blake leave this building. Preston tried to run. He forgot about his fake injury. He dropped the other crutch and sprinted toward the side door on 2 perfectly healthy legs. He did not make it 5 feet. The bailiffs tackled him. He went down screaming, kicking, cursing me, cursing his mother, cursing the world. I sat in my wheelchair watching my son being handcuffed on the floor of the courtroom. I felt no joy. I felt no triumph. I just felt a deep, exhausting relief. I looked at the cream-colored paper lying on the judge's bench. The UV light had faded, and the seal was invisible again. To the naked eye, it was just a piece of trash, but it was the strongest shield a wife could ever leave her husband. "Catherine," I whispered, "you got him." Sarah put a hand on my shoulder. She was crying silently. "We did it, Harrison," she said. I nodded. My leg was on fire. I was homeless. I was broke. But I was sane. And for the first time in a week, though, I was free. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened again. This time it wasn't a bailiff. It was men in dark suits with earpieces. The FBI. They had come for their case file, and they had come for the man who tried to steal it. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me, knowing that when I woke up, the nightmare would finally be over. The double doors at the back of the courtroom burst open for the second time that morning, but this time it was not a desperate family member making an entrance. It was a tactical team. 6 federal agents in windbreakers emblazoned with those 3 terrifying letters FBI swarmed into the room, their movements precise and overwhelming. Leading them was a senior agent who walked straight toward the bench, flashing a badge that gleamed under the courtroom lights. Behind him, walking with a renewed sense of purpose, was my old friend Arthur Henderson. He had made the call from his office the moment I escaped, but it was Sarah's decrypted files that had given them the ammunition to raid the castle. Preston was still on the floor, pinned by the bailiffs, his face pressed against the linoleum. When he saw the federal agents, the fight went out of him. He went limp, his arrogance deflating like a punctured tire. He knew what this meant. This was not a civil dispute anymore. This was the end of his life as a free man. Agent Miller, the lead officer, pulled Preston off the floor. He didn't handle him gently. He spun him around and slammed him against the prosecutor's table. "Preston Blake, you are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and the involuntary manslaughter of Catherine Blake," the agent announced, his voice booming through the silent room. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you start using it." At the mention of manslaughter, Tiffany let out a shrill scream. She tried to back away, her high heels clicking frantically on the floor as she pointed a manicured finger at her husband. "I did not know," she shrieked, looking at the judge, looking at the agents, looking at anyone who would listen. "He told me it was legal. I just signed where he told me to. I am a victim here." Agent Miller signaled to his partner. 2 officers moved on Tiffany. "We have your emails, Mrs. Blake," the agent said coldly. "We have the chat logs where you discussed the dosage of Mr. Blake's heart medication. You are not a victim. You are a co-conspirator." They cuffed her. The sound of the ratcheting metal was the sweetest music I had ever heard. She began to sob, her mascara running down her face, the facade of the wealthy socialite crumbling, to reveal the scared, greedy child underneath. As they dragged Preston toward the exit, he locked eyes with me. His face was a mask of disbelief and terror. He struggled against the agents, twisting his body to face me one last time. "Dad!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "You cannot let them do this. I am your son. I am your only son. You cannot do this to me." I looked at him. I looked at the boy I had raised, the man who had watched his mother die for a payout. I felt a deep, hollow ache in my chest, the ghost of the love I once had for him. But then I looked at the empty space beside me where Catherine should have been. I did not do this. "Preston," I said, my voice low but carrying across the room with the weight of a final judgment. "I built a house, I built a company, I tried to build a family. But this cage you are going into, I did not build that. Your greed did." The agents pushed him through the doors. His screams faded down the hallway, replaced by the heavy silence of the courtroom. The judge looked at me. She slowly closed the file on her desk. "Mr. Blake," she said softly, "the court apologizes for the error. The guardianship is dissolved. You are a free man." I nodded to her. I felt Sarah's hand on my shoulder squeezing tight. I looked down at my broken leg, throbbing in the wheelchair. I looked at my dirty clothes. I had lost my house. I had lost my wife. I had lost my son. But as I wheeled myself out of that courtroom into the bright, blinding sunlight of the city street, I took the deepest breath of my life. The air tasted clean. It tasted like truth. 6 months later, the Pacific Coast Highway stretched out before me, a ribbon of asphalt hugging the cliffs where the ocean met the sky. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and fire, a perfect mirror of the peace that had finally settled in my soul. I shifted gears, feeling the smooth, powerful rumble of the engine. It was my Ford F-150, but she looked different now. The dents were gone. The rust was treated. The paint was a deep, lustrous midnight blue. I had spent 3 months restoring her bolt by bolt, just me and the tools in a small garage I rented near the beach. It was therapy. It was reconstruction. I was not the owner of Blake Construction anymore. I had sold the company, but not to Apex Global. I sold it to the employees. I structured an employee stock ownership plan funded by the sale of the mansion and the recovery of the stolen assets. The men and women who poured the concrete now owned the concrete. It was what Catherine would have wanted. I looked at the passenger seat. Sitting there with his head out the window, ears flapping in the wind, was a golden retriever with a coat the color of honey. I found him at a shelter the day after the trial. He had been abandoned, too old for the previous owners, just like me. I named him Justice. He turned to look at me, panting happily, his tail thumping against the leather seat. I reached over and scratched him behind the ears. "We are almost there, buddy," I told him. I was heading north toward a small cabin I had bought in Oregon. No mansions, no trellis to climb. Just a porch, a view of the trees, and silence. Sarah was running the charitable foundation I had started in Catherine's name, dedicated to helping the elderly fight financial abuse. She visited on weekends. She was the daughter I never had. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a lighter. In my other hand, I held a photocopy of the cream-colored paper. The original was in the FBI evidence vault, locking Preston away for 20 years. But I kept a copy to remind me. I held the paper up to the dying light of the sun. That paper should have stayed in the trash, Preston had said. He thought it was refuse. He thought I was refuse. I clicked the lighter. The flame caught the edge of the paper. I watched it curl and blacken the fire, eating away the codes, the secrets, the pain. But real trash, I thought, as I tossed the burning paper out the window and watched the ashes scatter in the wind, has a way of taking itself out. I smiled, shifted into high gear, and drove into the horizon. The rearview mirror was empty. The road ahead was mine. This story reminds us that underestimating the elderly is a fatal mistake. Wisdom and experience are not weaknesses. They are weapons forged in fires that the young have not yet felt. Family is not defined by blood, but by loyalty and respect. When greed enters a home, it rots the foundation faster than termites, and no amount of money can fix a broken trust. The true legacy we leave behind is not in our bank accounts, but in the integrity of our actions. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps me share these important warnings with the world. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to cut ties with a toxic family member to save yourself? I read every single story. See you in the next video. Stay strong.